Oh, I thought you said we're already here.
Yep.
And I'm recording, so this pre-stuff is getting recorded, just so that you know.
Got it.
I just want everyone to know. Huh? Oh, here it is. Yep, I did that because, Brandon, I never really got clear who's going to get in. I was so afraid that the Google form was a Zoom link that we hadn't even created. Anyway, you're in here now. I don't need to talk to you on the phone. How's everything? I got this weird thing coming with the sun and all of this. While you welcome people coming in, I'm going to excuse myself because I've got to make sure I have some water and I got to do a bio break before we get started. Let me manage participants because I think I'm going to have to maybe let people into rooms. Do you see that? Do you know if you're going to see if someone's locked in a room?
Unless you make me a comment.
All right, here we go, people. Everyone ready? Here we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Janey, and I'm honored to serve as the president of the most diversity council in Boston's history. In addition, I have the pleasure of representing District 7, which includes Roxbury, South End, Dorchester, and Fenway. Welcome to the Economic Recovery of Nubian Square Town Hall. The purpose of this community forum is to create a space for community-driven, solution-oriented conversation that results in action. This is a continuation of the work many of us have already been doing together. I've convened gatherings regarding the economic status and plans for Nubian Square, and so have many others like Roxbury Main Streets, Black Market, and the Office of Economic Development. This is ongoing work. It is not one and done, and it cannot be the same conversation over and over and over again. This reconvening, if you will, is timely because we know that the Black community is being disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, which shouldn't be surprising given our starting point. On the health side, District 7 has a 30-year life expectancy gap, depending on what your zip code is. And on the wealth side, there is a $250,000 wealth gap between white households and Black households in Boston. COVID is illustrating and exacerbating pre-existing inequities. We cannot go back to normal. Normal is a slow, painful death for poor Black people in this city. The recovery efforts must be equitable. The city can't just pump out a bunch of money to any and everybody. We must prioritize lifting up those who have been left behind historically. Things are extremely difficult on all fronts right now, but I was recently reminded of how resilient we are, that we are not waiting around for a savior to come save us, and that includes city government, but that we must be held accountable and respond to the needs of those we serve, and that they are the ones that must drive the conversation. I also know the importance of controlling our own narrative and approaching this work, not only with an equity lens, but with an asset-based lens that builds upon our strengths as a people and as a community. As a community organizer, I learned a long time ago that working together around a common goal and shared vision is how you get things done. And I'm grateful to partner with our co-sponsors, BECMA, Boston Ujima Project, Black Market, Reclaim Roxbury, the Boston Jobs Coalition, and Alternatives for Community Environment. For tonight's conversation, we hope to address many of the concerns that entrepreneurs and small business owners are facing as we outline a plan for recovery and highlight available resources. To prepare, we encouraged everyone interested in this issue to send questions in advance of the town hall. We will also be taking relevant questions that haven't already been answered through our Facebook live stream. I want to thank everyone who sent in questions and all those who are watching and participating. With that said, tonight's forum will follow a panel discussion format, and I will serve as the moderator. We will have a variety of questions prepared that were collected through the registration forms, as I mentioned, and we have allotted time to take questions from the audience through the live stream as well. A question directed to a specific panelist is allotted 3 minutes for an answer, and others can jump in and they'll have 1 minute to do so if recognized. And questions that are directed to the panel at large will have 2 minutes per panelist, And again, I will recognize them to speak. We are asking all panelists to raise their blue Zoom hands to jump in for questions that are not directed toward them, and we'll do our best to cover as many of the relevant questions as possible, and we'll use a timekeeper to keep us on time and on track. Now, let me introduce our esteemed panel, and then we'll get right into the discussion. John Barrows is from the Mayor's Office of Economic Development. He's been leading that work since 2014. Before that, John led the neighborhood revitalization efforts at DSNI and served on the Boston School Committee. Also representing the city tonight is Natalia Urtubey, and please forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your name, Natalia, who serves as Director of Small Business. Natalia and her team, they work with businesses and stakeholders and city departments to remove barriers to doing business in the city of Boston. We're very fortunate to have Shagun Idowu on the panel. Shagun is a lifelong Boston resident. He graduated from Morehouse College in 2012, and he's now the executive director of the Black Economic Council of Massachusetts, also known as BECMA. We're blessed to have Black Market Chief Curator and co-owner Kai Grant joining us this evening. Kai has 15 years of experience inside of Boston's retail landscape. She founded Black Market, Nubian Square's first flexible cultural event space and marketplace, with her husband Christopher in 2017. And this site is helping to reignite Roxbury's creative economy. And for full disclosure, she is also my sister. And Malia Lazu is also joining us. Malia is an executive VP and regional president at Berkshire Bank. Malia works to generate wealth for communities by expanding access to capital and spurring economic growth, especially in communities of color. She worked with the city to create the Accelerate Boston program and continues to help entrepreneurs of color raise capital. We also have Leonard Egerton and Clarissa Cropper, and they are the proud owners of the only Black-owned independent bookstore in Boston, and it's located right in Nubian Square, and that is Frugal Bookstore. Through the bookstore, they've partnered with many community organizations across the city with the goal of promoting literacy among our youth. And last but not least, we have Haris Hardaway joining us tonight. Haris is the newly elected president of the recently renamed Roxbury Main Streets. Haris also owns the popular fashion boutique Final Touch Boutique, which is a family-owned and operated retail business. I am delighted to have an amazing group of panelists, and this is a really much needed conversation to help us move the work forward. So I want to thank you all for joining us tonight for this community-driven, solutions-focused discussion. I want to encourage us to think about, as we frame this conversation, to think about the role that the individual should play, the role that the community at large should play, and the role that government should play as we build upon action-oriented solutions. I think it's imperative that we plan with an equity lens and one that repairs the harms that were created. And the harms were created by policies, by city councils and state legislatures all across our country, and by Congress and our courts. And it's not enough to stop doing the harm. Many would rightfully argue that the harm is still happening. We must also repair the harm. And it will be impossible to achieve an equitable recovery or true justice until then. So with that said, let's get to it. And this question we're going to start off with is for Chief Barrows or Natalia, and you'll have 3 minutes to respond. While it is great to see that the city was able to release millions of dollars in funding to small businesses in the Small Business Relief Fund, many, including myself, have raised concerns about the selection process and how people were chosen. I want to know from you, if you could just tell us what steps will be taken moving forward to improve the process, not only in terms of transparency, but really providing a larger focus on equity.
President Janey, I just want to first thank you for the forum, for bringing us together to have an important conversation at an important time in our community. I know I only got 3 minutes, so I'm going to get right into it. in the early conversations and when we first started holding our small business conference calls, we heard from small businesses that they needed a lifeline. They needed to be able to pay the bills now, and that the federal money that was going to come out was going to be too slow. And in many ways, businesses we talked to said the small businesses are going to get left out. And in fact, that's what's happened with the PPP process and the different federal processes. Round one left a lot of our small businesses out, and round two, some of the banks are doing a far better job. I'll give Malia a shout out on the call and Berkshire and what you're doing there, and other banks are doing a far better job of making sure that some of our small businesses get the funding that they need. But even with that, we knew that the small businesses wouldn't be applying, and they're still not applying to the federal program. The federal program has some forgiveness regulations that are not helpful. People are scared about it. We've got businesses that are offering to give that money back because the onerous regulations on it, and that's a problem as well. That said, we quickly put together a fund that was aimed at the smallest businesses in our community. And so I'm happy to say that 70% of the businesses that applied are 5 employees or less. 50% of the businesses that applied are minority-owned businesses. Yes, we did filter, and we asked the businesses, or we tried to select the businesses that were most impacted in the industries that were most impacted. There were 7 industries most impacted. And yes, we do have a bias to those industries in our selection process. So food and accommodation, the food businesses in our community got preference. Businesses that were in any of the top industries got preference in terms of being hit. We've got the first set of rounds came out. We've got now about 500 plus checks that are out. We have 1,800 eligible small businesses in that application pool. The mayor just announced yesterday that he's going to put in another $5.5 million to make sure that every one of those 1,800 applicants that are eligible get their money. And so we're excited that that's happening. And so I'm going to stop because my time is up, but looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Yep. And can you specify how much went to those businesses of color?
So because we know 50% of the businesses that are eligible are of color, all of them are going to get a check. So there's no one that's going to get left out of getting a check. All 50%, which means 900 businesses of color will get a check from the city.
And as a follow-up, since this conversation is on Nubian Square, I think what would be helpful is to have a sense of which businesses, if any, from Nubian Square were in this pool. And so if you could speak to that, if not now, I don't know if that's data we have to collect, but I want to make sure that this conversation is laser-like focused on what we're doing for this square. And I want to give other panelists an opportunity to weigh in on that if they want, by a show of blue hands.
Sure, absolutely. There were businesses in Nubian Square that received checks in the first round. It will be businesses in Nubian Square that receive checks in the subsequent round. We can definitely get you, and in fact, all of the businesses that receive checks will be public. At the end of this, we will post. It is public. It's a public process. Anybody that's receiving money from the city, we will be posting that online, and so you will know who those people are. But we do have businesses in Nubian Square that receive in the first round and that will receive in subsequent rounds.
And just to clarify again, for anyone here, anyone's watching, timeline on future rounds, what can we expect on that, the next round of funding?
Yeah, so we are cutting checks weekly. So every week there is a round of checks that will be cut. We do have, because...
Is there a new, to clarify, is there a new application round? That's what I'm...
new application
so
round.
If you missed that, if you didn't know, the outreach didn't make it to you, maybe you didn't have all your ducks in a row, couldn't get your application right. I don't know what the challenges may have been, but if you didn't get into that, is the door closed? Is that what I'm to understand?
So we've paused the fund. We've paused the fund and not stopped the fund. because there are ongoing conversations of how we can open it back up.
Anyone, I want to open that up if anyone wants to, otherwise we can move on. I'm going to ask this since there's no follow-up here, just anyone on the panel can certainly answer this. And this is really recognizing, I think, what the city already recognizes as a challenge. It's certainly been a piece of my advocacy, a priority for me in terms of getting more money to businesses owned by people of color. And we know that there is inequity when we look at, how the city does business, when we look at, whether it's construction jobs and, the goals that we often miss there. I'm opening this up though to the panel, not the city, someone else on the panel who may want to speak to what could be helpful as a small business owner, as an entrepreneur of color. What can the city do to better include you in the mix so that we can get to our goals of making sure that businesses that are owned by women, people of color, and Boston residents are getting the business from the city that they need and the support that they need. Haris, I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself.
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Just want to give a hi and hello, a shout out from Nubian Square. And want to thank all the businesses that are trying to stay open right now and those that are shuttered at home. We see you, we hear you, and we're here for you. My question, if I can, Counselor, go back. You asked about what's happening with the money that was distributed by the city. We're so thankful that the mayor was able to put in some more funds. There were a few businesses that were cut off at the last minute that weren't able to apply. Is there still going to be an open portal given the new funds for those businesses to seek out that $2,500? That's a question for John, if he has any information about that.
Yep, so any questions that you have, please feel free to raise them here, as well as any ideas or suggestions. And I hope, John, you and your team, Chief Bowers, you and your team are able to track that and even respond in real time, because I'm sure people who are watching want an answer to that as well. Thank you. And if you have more to add, Haris.
Oh, sorry. Just muting and unmuting. I know when John has time, or now Natalia can answer that question. I just want to throw it out there. But one of the things that I feel like we could do for Nubian Square and abroad across the city for businesses of color, women-owned businesses, is create a subcommittee to help give the information or suggestions to the state's task force that the governor set up. So I'm sure that Office of Economic Development already has that on their game plan, but for us, we're just wondering, how can we participate, support your department in getting the right information and the answers that we need to be successful?
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. First of all, brother, you look good.
And John, before Chief Bowers, before you jump in and respond, I want to just open up the floor specifically maybe to see if the folks at Frugal want to chime in with what support the city should be offering, any ideas or any questions that you have, and the same thing to Kai Grant, as a stakeholder, as a key business owner with Black Market, and then you could respond to all of them together. Do you guys want to jump in? Show of blue hands here. Okay, I'm gonna go right to Frugal Bookstore and save you the trouble. Go ahead. Carissa, do you want to jump in? You're unmuted, go ahead. Kai, do you want to jump in while they figure out their issues on that end? Go ahead, Kai.
Hi, everybody. It's great to be seen tonight. Great to see everybody. I think that it would be amazing if the city actually came up with a technical assistance program that was pro bono, that could provide digital web services for businesses. I think it's imperative that we both deal in the physical realm and the digital realm as we move forward. It's something that was happening pre-COVID, and it's now a big trend. And so I think, there has to be something structured that's put into place where technical assistance can be offered, or there can be a database of web designers that are Black, that are people of color, that are female, that can be hired in order to assist the businesses that are in need. The other thing I will say to that is that the city, if the city could find a way to expedite these checks, that would be incredible. It's very difficult to sustain without an immediate turnaround of 14 days max in these times. So the technical assistance, ensuring that the purveyors of the technical assistance will be guaranteed, people with melanin and women. And then the second piece to that would be the checks that are coming or going to come. If we can get those checks, somehow the system expedite those checks. Thank you, Counselor.
Yes, thank you. And let's see if we can now shoot over to Frugal Bookstore to see if Clarissa or Leonard wanted to jump in there.
Hi, how's everyone doing?
Good. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a similar question as Haris did about, because we got the information late about the $2,500 grant that was going to be given, and my email came back that we weren't eligible. So I wanted to know, is there going to be a second round offered to businesses? Council, this for Mr. John Barrows.
Yes, and that is the question that I have as well, because Chief Barrows, I'm concerned that there are entrepreneurs, just as you've heard from here, who experienced this as well and are being left out. And it could just be based on some sort of technicality. So let's get that straight. Before you respond, I'm gonna just allow Malia Lazu to jump in, and then we'll hear from Chief Barrows, and then I have more questions that we're gonna get to that were sent in that I wanna make sure we get to. So Malia Lazu.
Thanks so much, Counselor, and hi everyone, it's so good to see everyone. I just wanted to throw out, because Kai's point is, I love the idea, and include Kristen Ransom. She has a coalition of women and people of color, so maybe that's a group that the city can tap into for the TA dollars.
Excellent. John, do you want to jump in? Thank you, Chief Barrows.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Madam President. Appreciate all the questions. Olivia, I need you to say hi to folks. Say hello. Say hi, everybody. Okay. And okay. So I wanted to take these questions in order and say to Haris, and I think the question was asked again. We are in fact considering how we can reopen this fund. And I use the word pause very intentionally, right? I think it's highly likely, in fact, that we will figure out a way to unpause the fund. I want to also say to Frugal Bookstore immediately, I'd love to revisit what the technical issue or whatever was, because if you started an application, I can work with you. I just need you to have started the application, and you did that. So we're going to make sure that we get back to you on that. And Natalia, who is sitting here, is the director of the small business unit for the city and is running the fund, in fact. So we're going to make sure we get back to you on that. Natalia, if you can give them instructions on what they do next, that'd be great.
Yeah. Natalia.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. And I do also want to address the TA question, because I think that's a really important one. So as far as the grant goes, I don't see one from Frugal, but Clarissa, you and I and Leonard, we can connect offline. I wonder if you may have if you have a DBA, or if you're using a different, because for you to have heard that it was not eligible, I would have the application. So I want to make sure we get that fixed and figured out. Just, because we want everyone to have a fair shot at the grants. And then just very quickly off of the TA, so we currently have a TA program where we have TA providers who are experts in everything from legal assistance to accounting to digital to web design to logo design. We have TA providers on deck. We have paused that work during COVID because of how crazy everything is, and just being able to think through that, you know, those funds are not unlimited, so we want to make sure we're using them appropriately. We do know that going into the future post-COVID, every business is going to have to have some sort of an online presence, and we want to help businesses get there. So we will be thinking about workshops and trainings to help people use that, so we can use our TA providers to do that. And just so folks know, our existing TA providers, more than 50% of them are people of color. So we're very intentional when we're hiring TA providers. And then as we gear up to go into our next round of TA, which is an entire RFP process, I would love everybody on this call to help us identify additional folks. So Kristen Ransom is a great idea. Any other folks that you know do this work that we could hire and have as a TA provider on our team, we would absolutely love that.
Thank
so
you,
we'll
Natalia. Thank you, Natalia. We're going to get right back to the money.
Sure.
I want to get back to the funds, and I've got a question for you, Shagun.
Madam President,
Yes,
if I may just answer to a couple of other questions that were raised in that
if
first.
Olivia lets you. Only
Yes,
if she says it's
now.
okay. Please. All right, go ahead. And
so
then I want to get to this money. Yep.
Yeah, and so there was a question about being able to set up a program. I think Kai might have raised the question. Natalia, I wanna take that question from Ty and recommend that in fact we set up a program with new TA providers that specifically addresses the question of online presence. And so we're gonna take the feedback here today. We're gonna set up a whole different TA program with the goal of making sure that the businesses in our community have an online presence. This is going to be a critical decider for who is going to make it past the COVID pandemic. And so I just wanted to address that specifically, Kai. I think you're dead on, and it's important. The second thing, and I'll be quick, the subcommittee to the state, Maurice, we are working with a health, we stood up a health inequities task force. The Health Inequities Task Force is going to call for an equity town hall soon, and we're going to call for a meeting with the State Advisory Committee. The mayor's actually going to talk to the governor tomorrow afternoon, hopefully not putting him on the spot, to get us that meeting with the Advisory Committee, and then we can make sure that people are on that and making sure that voices are heard directly with the Advisory Committee.
Thank you. So I want to come back to this notion of the importance of resources getting into our community through these funds. And I've got a question for you, Shagun. Now, the federal government is offering the Paycheck Protection Program, PPP, that we're talking about. The state has various small business loans. The city of Boston has had some small business relief. We've been talking about that here. However, we have yet to see a relief fund specifically for businesses of color. Talk about why this is such an essential part of the economic recovery and why we need to focus on this type of equity. And then anyone else can chime in with specifics about what they want to see the city, the state, or the feds do around it. Shagun?
Sure thing. Well, Councilor, again, I appreciate the invitation to be here and to especially sit here in conversation with all of these beautiful Black people. So, to answer your question, you're absolutely right. The inequities on the federal level are stark. I think we saw a report from the Center for Responsible Lending just last week that 95% of Black-owned businesses across the country did not have access to federal programs like PPP, like the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. When we think about all minority-owned businesses, it was roughly 90% of those businesses did not have access to what is now about $700 billion. And then we're hearing even further this week, Chief Barros mentioned earlier that a lot of our businesses did not get the loan or didn't even apply, and that's for a variety of reasons. It could be the predatory lending practices in our community, that history. It could be the fact that we don't get loans from banks anyway. So a lot of folks didn't have that relationship. But now, if you did get the money, it's almost, it's terrible for your business now because of these barriers they've set up in terms of having them forgiven. And so now this could be further debt for businesses that we have been trying to funnel into this program. In terms of why it's important to have a specific fund for Black and brown businesses, it's this reason. White people are not the saviors, it's Black and brown people who are. Our businesses save the economy. The Brookings Institution put out a report in early April that showed that after the Great Recession, even though more of our businesses went under, it was actually Black and brown businesses that added 1.8 million jobs to the American economy, whereas combined white male and female owned businesses lost 1.6 million jobs. So when we invest in Black businesses and brown businesses, we're actually investing in the future and the saving of our economy. So for us, it's important that we're giving this right back to the businesses that are helping to stabilize our communities, that we're setting aside portions of money strictly for them. The other reason is that, again, all this talk about technical assistance is this fact. We as Black people are experts at the business that we do. We're experts in our industries, but we pour so much of ourselves into that business that we oftentimes don't have the same amount of time to invest in the back end part of things, and the accounting and the HR, et cetera. So therefore, we're not able to access these funds, whether they be loans or grants, because we don't have a CFO. We don't have an accounting department to make sure we have all of the right documents together. So it's important that we're setting aside a specific fund that allows us to get our act together, to get our back of house in order, to be able to take advantage of these funds, as opposed to what we've seen happen on the federal level and really here in the city and on the state level when we did have a fund, because it doesn't exist anymore. The fact that first come, first serve creates a gold rush mentality and allows those who are already prepared to obtain those funds. So we need something separate to give us time to achieve that funding.
Thank you. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Very important points about a specific fund for Black and brown folk. And important when we're talking about funds, in my mind, I'm talking about a program with like grants as an option, not just these loans. I worry about trying to saddle businesses that are already struggling with unnecessary debt. So I want to be careful that we're not asking people who are already struggling to take on debt. So anyone else want to chime in? Show of blue hands. Let's go. Haris, you have the floor.
I just wanted to first say thank you to the Office of Economic Development. They have these weekly calls and they educate us and they let us know what is out there. And I've not seen that before by anybody. So we really appreciate it here in Nubian Square. What I do agree with is with Shagun that we are the answer. We are the only solution. And so what we here in Nubian Square and through the Roxbury Main Streets are going to begin discussing is how do we collaborate and raise funds to provide grants, because we're not going to be able to go to the city and the state. There's more economic recovery they have to do, but we have to figure out how to bring families back to the square, bring nonprofits, people who support them. How can they support the overall economic recovery of Nubian Square? So I'd love to start talking with Ujima and Bekma and some of our also people of color that live outside of Boston, that have moved but still have contacts here. There is a lot of money out there. There's a lot of philanthropy, that can be done. And so we have to rely on each other to get this recovery going.
Excellent. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
Madam
Otherwise,
President,
go ahead, Chief Barrows.
I want to just support the notion that Black businesses have a tremendous impact on Black wealth creation, right? We hire Black employees, we do more business with other Black businesses, the money circulation. So the notion that Shagun is laying in front of us is really important. And I also say this, as the narrative and the data is out, 40% of the people who are dying from COVID are Black African Americans, right? Let's be really clear. 40% of those who are infected, right? So as we talk to philanthropists out there, people are being clear they want to have a positive impact on the Black community. So there's opportunity out there. Haris, I think you're absolutely right. Let's start a fund. Let's fundraise. We've got some limitations on the government side, but we don't have any limitations in terms of trying to promote something, right? So we can be out there with you trying to help fundraise to get this money in there.
Yep, Charles, I'm gonna let Shagun jump right in with that. Shagun?
No, yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said. I'm just going to add one more point in terms of how we get money outside of grants to Black businesses and brown businesses, and that's contracts. Right now there's a lot of money being funneled in by FEMA and through MEMA. One of our community elders, Louis Elisa, talks a lot about this, having served on the federal level for disaster management. So I think, the other thing that we have to look at outside of, yes, getting these grants and technical assistance to our businesses is that there are also businesses that are ready to do work, who are waiting for these opportunities. So we need to make sure that we're connecting our Black and brown businesses to existing contracts with all this money that's coming into the city and the state.
Exactly. And rest assured, as a District 7 City Councilor and as a President of the City Council, I'm a broken record. We are in the midst of our budget season, and it's my top 2 questions for every single city department that is before us. How much money are we spending on goods and services with people of color, women, and locally owned businesses? It's at the top of my list, absolutely. And this path to wealth creation through ownership is exactly right. Home ownership and business ownership. I want to get Kai into the loop. I want to get Malia into the loop, and then we're going to move on. I'm going to start with Kai. Kai, you're going to have 1 minute to follow up. And then Malia, before you tag on to this, you have the next question. So I'm just going to say that question, and then you can answer both. Kai, let's go to you.
Yeah, my brother Shagun just laid it all out for you. I just kind of want to put a little icing on his cake. Can I do that? Can I frost it?
Oh, yes.
Man, go ahead now. Go ahead.
That cake. Yes.
Right. Councilor, Madam President, you just mentioned ownership. I think we're not going to get anywhere. So Black women are the #1 demographic to start a business, but how can we sustain a business? Our numbers are off the charts because we found things, we launch things, we start, but we never get to the place where we can actually grow the roots that we need to grow. We need to be in position to own. We have to have, affordable business condos. We have to work a plan with landlords inside of Nubian Square to A, give us some reprieve and defer our rents, and B, we have to figure out how we can move towards building up an ownership mentality and some type of program that would allow us to be able to maintain our status inside of this commercial district.
Amen. And I'm going to echo that. So I want to make sure, because I heard a clear solution there. So I want to make sure you got that on the books, Chief Barrows. And I would echo, it's not just about the rents as a solution, but this notion about business owners owning their space. And so we've got to do better at offering the opportunity for conduized ground space for business owners. So I'm putting that out there because, again, solutions oriented. We need some clear solutions. Malia, I'm going to ask this next question of you. You can feel free to answer this question we're on and then this next one. We've been talking a lot about community partnerships. We've been talking about collaboratives and networks, coalitions. You mentioned Ranson earlier, that they've been essential to building up the community. Can you talk about the role that financial institutions like your own can play in the recovery? You've certainly been a wonderful community partner. So that's one question. And then if there are any underutilized assistance programs that you're seeing in your institution or others that could be helpful for Nubian Square, please lay those out. And then anyone can have a follow-up to this question as well. Go ahead, Malia.
All right, thanks so much. I love what Shagun and Kai both said around vendors, because I think we often talk about grants as a path forward, and grants are an important part I prefer reparations, but I'll take grants. And the reason why is because we know charity isn't equity, right? And so, what we also know is that 50% of Black and brown people are underbanked versus 19% of white people. So that means that there are a lot of Black and brown businesses that should be banked, that should be able to build wealth and not be dependent on the benevolence of the top 1% or those who have the ability to do charity. And so I think grants are critical. But things like making sure that you're hiring everybody and not just hiring one certain segment of businesses, that also makes it so that people don't have to go to get grants. And that really leads into Council President. Girl, I thought we were sitting around. I'm like,
you thought we were out in your backyard, sitting around on your deck.
And especially because Kai and you are right there, so I'm feeling like,
hey, Madam President, you gotta put some respect.
Exactly, gotta put some respect on it. That's why
when we sit in your backyard, is all day as Kim.
Exactly. I was like, when you call your mom by her name and you're like, oh, like I almost. What am I saying? But the question that you asked, Council President, is so important because what can financial institutions do? And as an organizer who now sits in a bank, I'm really looking at how do we deconstruct power, right? How do we actually deconstruct the institutional and structural biases? And so, obviously we worked with BECMA and we worked with the chamber, the first round and the second round to do PPP applications. We are still taking them. There is still money. So if you have not turned in an application and you hope to do so, please email me. We can also talk you through the reporting. One of my bankers said the other day that I think is so important is don't disqualify you, right? Like figure out how this money can help. You don't disqualify you. But as far as the underutilized resources, we definitely have a couple of products. They are loan-based, low interest or no interest. There are community underwritten products that we have that people can absolutely use. Our My Banker program is a concierge banking service where they can call you and come to your house when we're allowed to do that type of thing again. But I really think that what financial institutions need to do if they really want to help with the rebuild is listen. Everyone here has talked about how the American economy's lifeblood is actually MLK Boulevard and not, that there's main streets, that other main streets that keep this afloat. And it's important for banks to sit with Black and brown and minority businesses and ask them, how can we help you? This is what we have. And figure that out. So with Revex Labs that we have in Nubian Square and with our partnerships, we hope to continue to be learning and hearing about how we can help minority businesses build wealth.
Thank you. I want to pick up on something you said. You said, don't disqualify you. And that's so important. It reminds me of something that I learned, and I learned this from watching Oprah, no judgment. But one day on her show, she said, and I'll never forget it, she said, don't take no from someone who is not empowered to tell you yes. And it's been life-changing for me. Like I will not, the little front person who's trying to tell me it's not gonna work, I don't wanna hear it. Let's get to the next person, to the next person, to the person who can tell me yes. So thank you for that. If anyone wants to chime in with a minute rebuttal, we can go there. If not, we'll go to the next question, which will be for Frugal Bookstore, just to kind of give you the heads up. Anyone want to add on to that thoughtful conversation with a show of blue hands? Seeing no blue up, there is a blue hand. Before you jump in, Chief Barrows, I want to remind anyone who may be viewing this that they too have the opportunity to get their questions in. We had a robust process during the registration period where people were submitting questions, and that's what we're talking about now. But if you're watching this on the Facebook page and you have a question, please write it out. We've got folks, staff who are following the page and can get those questions into this conversation. I'm gonna go to Chief Barrows. I'm gonna go to Haris. You each have 60 seconds to follow up, and then we're gonna go the next question to Frugal Bookstore. Thank you. Chief Barrows.
I'll keep mine simple. I want to echo Malia's invitation for people to apply to the PPP loans. There's still money available. City of Boston is providing technical assistance for people to apply. It is really important. It has some challenges, but it also has tremendous benefits. And I'd love to talk to people through that and try to get them more money out in the community.
Haris?
I just want to echo that you should apply. My family was actually one of the families that didn't want to apply because we disqualified ourselves because we heard the word loan. And so had we not had the opportunity from folks on this panel here, BECMA, Office of Economic Development, and I know Kai was on the joint call, so thank you all for being part of that Zoom to get the community out there and knowing what's going on. There's a lot out there in the federal government, and because we're scared of the word no, we don't go for it. One of the things that I also want to put out there is that everyone in the community is a power broker when it comes to saving and recovery. You bank with certain banks. You can call, you can write a letter, you can demand that they participate in the recovery of your community. You know, right now I've been taught of the greatest generation, and many of the folks that have garnered property or businesses that allow us in Nubian Square to be where we are now. It is time that we put back into principality the structure and the volunteerism, the activism, the speaking out that helped us get to where we are now. We have to do that together again.
Amen. Amen. Let the church say amen. And with that, we are going to go to my favorite, the good Reverend Dr. Shagun. Can you jump in for a 60-minute follow-up before we go to Frugal?
60 minutes, yeah. Well,
no, God, no.
I can fill that.
Seconds.
I can fill that. No, I just wanted to, again, repeat what everyone has said. So I guess I am a preacher. I'm kidding. That's a joke. But PPP, even though it is a loan, we are, as an organization, also encouraging our folks to do it. And to the chief's point of providing technical assistance on the city's end, I know that BECMA is part of a larger coalition known as the Massachusetts PPP Equitable Access Initiative, which is about 50 different community organizations and lenders and technical assistance providers who are not only helping folks fill out their applications and answering any technical questions, but also, like I mentioned, there are lenders who are part of this group, folks who are accepting new customers, which is different because a lot of big banks were not. So we're trying to get as many folks as possible into this pipeline. I think the last numbers I saw is that we've helped around 500 different small businesses and gotten, close to 200 of them in the pipeline. And we want to raise that number as much as possible and are already working on ways to support businesses who after they receive the loan to figure out how to make sure they spend that 75% on payroll and the extra 25% on utilities and other operating expenses. So just wanted to put that resource out there.
Nope, and I appreciate that. And let's, just since we're trying to think about some clear, concrete solutions coming out of this, Chief Barrows mentioned the limitations of having a loan that was specific to Black people or specific to people of color. Certainly that can live somewhere else. It can live with BECMA or somewhere else. So one, let's try to create that fund elsewhere. And then the one that does rest within city government, I think the goal is we got to make sure if that window opens up again, that we just flood them with applications from Black and brown businesses. So I would suggest that. I'm going to jump into a question for Frugal Bookstore because I'm really interested in understanding your experience as a business that the governor deemed was non-essential, even though we say reading is fundamental. Can you talk about your experience having to close? And you're in an industry that already has a challenge competing with online businesses, with Amazon and big box. It's hard for independent bookstores to survive. Then you're in a commercial district that is already in transition, and now you've been forced to close. What was it like for your transition, trying to do more sales online? We talked earlier in the conversation about technical assistance and support. If you could just share your experience in ways that we can all be helpful. Again, the individual, the community, and government.
Well, actually, we've been busy. we've been fortunate enough to be able to pivot online because we had a website already set up, and people are just showing us a lot of love. You know, even though we're not allowed to have people come into the store, people have been calling the phone, people have been emailing us, people have been going on the website. I get in my car, I take the book to your doorstep. We have a little social distancing going on, drop the books off. We were fortunate enough to receive orders from the Boston Public Library to partner with them to give to different centers. So we've kind of been just as busy, but it's been more so coming through online and not the walk-in customer.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad that you've been able to transition. I know some of the other businesses, it's been difficult. I'm glad you mentioned the partnership with the Boston Public Library. That is essential. For me, I've been all along as the construction for the Dudley Library has been happening, and it's great and beautiful, and we're worthy and we deserve an amazing library in our neighborhood, but we also deserve an amazing independent bookstore. And I don't want the library to cancel you guys, because you guys have pretty much been open all the time they've been under construction. And now when things open up again, they're going to open up and you're going to open up again at the same time. I don't want there to be this competition. We need to make sure that it is supporting the work that you guys are doing. Malia wants to jump in, and then we're going to keep the conversation going. Malia?
No, that's okay. We've moved on. Let's keep going. Let's keep swimming.
Oh, okay. If there are any solutions or ideas that you guys would offer from Frugal for us in the city, or I know the community has been pouring out support, that's great. If you wanted to offer a quick 60-second, here's what we need. If not, that's fine, and we're going to move on. The next question will be for Haris.
I think, although we've been busy, there's still like this fear surrounding us with rent coming down. You know, even though we've been busy, it's not enough to, you know, pay all of the bills. So I fear, along with Clarissa, like what's going to happen 2-3 months from now when they do finally open up. I don't know if they're going to consider us an essential business or not. So I'm not sure how, you know, we're going to manage when times come when the landlords start asking for the rent. You know, so I've been wondering why there hasn't been, I haven't heard of a push for some type of deferment of rent for commercial spaces.
Yeah, well, counselors have certainly been pushing for that, and we actually have a hearing order on the books right now for that. So many of us have been hearing from our small business owners in our district and have been pushing for just that. I want to get Haris into the mix. You too are a business owner of what would be considered a non-essential business having to close. It's good to see you in the shop now. Certainly love the clothing at the boutique. Happy to be a supporter myself. But just talk about what it's been like for you as a small business owner that is deemed non-essential. But I also want you to put on your Main Streets hat and talk about some of the support that Main Streets has been trying to offer, or some of the challenges that you've observed that we need to be tackling.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I love saying that. So as a business, I'm a co-owner. It's a family business. I have both my parents, my brothers, when they're on this coast, help out as well. But it's been difficult because we actually shuttered our doors about a week and a half before the mandated closures, because both my parents are over the age of 60. And so is our part-time store manager. So it became about health and wellness rather than the dollar. And I know businesses making that decision every day. I still have the store manager calling and saying, hey, I'll come in. And I'm like, but I don't want you to ride the bus. I don't want you to come in contact with anyone. So it's been a little difficult. We've actually had the opportunity of community support in terms of how to reopen doing it online. We've done some conference calls with boutiques in Philadelphia who have a much stricter quarantine. And so we're preparing to try and go and do that to make some money. Right now, we have no income. We can't pay our rent. We can't pay any of our bills. But I do want to say thank you to the Main Streets Foundation. There are 10 businesses in Nubian Square that are receiving $1,000 each, and some of them received their checks today. And I got text messages and emails. So I just want to say thank you to the foundation, and there's another set of 5 that are coming. For Main Streets itself, it really is about being a collaborator right now and opening yourself up to different ideas, not just from City Hall, but also from the people. So one of the most important things we've done is to secure more leadership within the Main Streets. We have a new name, Roxbury Main Streets, speaks to the heart of the whole area that we serve. But we also have a new executive director. His name is Robert George, and he starts on Monday. So one of the things that's hard for us is having new leadership start in the middle of a pandemic. But we're gonna work with the city and our businesses to make sure that they get what they need. Some of the major things we're looking at is how to help people go live online, provide technical assistance, but also we are 54% African-American in this district or Black. And there is a diaspora among that. That includes those from the Caribbean, those that are Spanish speakers, those that are Korean. There are many different groups here. And so we want people to understand that even though the heart and soul of Roxbury comes with a community of color, we work with those who work with us. So it's about supporting every business here, finding a way to get those with resources to share them, including our churches. Maybe one day we can get them to give a percentage of the benevolent offering of that week to a fund for the businesses here. We have to start thinking more communal and opening up our minds. So that's pretty much where we're going, and we'll hope you go with us.
Sounds good, sounds good. I want to keep on this theme of community and some of the local businesses and bring Black market into the mix. We've been talking a lot about how community can support, how city government can support. I know for you, it's been difficult. This is your season. You would have been opening up the marketplace. And it's not just you. There are dozens of vendors that depend on the marketplace opening up. Can you talk about what it's meant for them? And given that so many of the vendors are artists, what other opportunities, given how difficult this is, but what opportunities are now presenting themselves in terms of maybe making masks or anything else? Kai, you want to jump in?
Yeah, so we just put out a survey this past Monday, and we have close to 50 responses for micro businesses, because it's a very different type of business when you are launching and when you are someone who is it's kind of mirroring the gig economy. So the majority of the businesses that vend with our marketplace work full-time. They're full-time, employees at Harvard, at Raytheon, at Wellesley College. There's a professor with a PhD. There's a doctor who is a silversmith. There is, all kinds of different industried folks that this is their dream. This is something that is very near and dear to them. So when they come inside of our space, it is more to present what they want to retire into or what they would actually like to leave their full-time jobs. In addition to which, they have families. So imagine someone who may be exposed to job loss, okay? In addition to their second income loss through Black market's revenue stream. And now they have to learn how to homeschool their children, who tend to vend with us as well, because families vend inside of our space. So they're really struggling right now. Some are, it's interesting because as the surveys come in, I'm looking at the data, and I'm not disclosing anything at this point until we're finished. But you can see that some businesses are truly entrepreneurial and they're pivoting. Some businesses are going totally digital. Some businesses are partially digital. Some businesses are learning how to respond to the needs of PPE, which is personal protection equipment.
Mhm.
So we are forming a
So
small.
are people making masks? Are people
Yes,
making soaps?
so we
And
have soap
guys,
makers
talk
that
about too the loss of festivals. So these events that are all being canceled,
yeah.
this is where vendors and artists, they live for these things. And these things being canceled, whether, you know, we're talking
Yeah, this is where they thrive.
Exactly.
Yeah, because because when you're inside a Black market space, for example, in December when we had the self-care event for all of those who serve inside of the state and the city, there was a vendor who set up. And when she set up, she took a picture and posted it on Instagram. She had an automatic $300 sale from doing that. Those are the type of things that happen inside of our market. This is why we go live every single marketplace, because we drive foot traffic in physically, and we drive foot traffic into people's social media spheres and their websites.
So physical foot traffic into Nubian Square,
yeah,
supporting other businesses, but
also
foot traffic in the virtual world for promoting these other entrepreneurs. Let me bring in the city folks again. And then I see you, Haris. I'm going to let you jump in, but we've been talking a lot about the gig economy, and I would love to understand the city response and how Natalia or Chief Barrows, you can jump in on how we're supporting these types of entrepreneurs. And then I want to hear from Haris. Natalia, John, anyone?
Go ahead, Natalia.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, so one of the pivots that we've made in the last year and a half or so is shifting from to support micro enterprise. So the 0 to 5 size businesses, in which we know are a lot of these like tiny, startup phase, incubation, innovative business owners. And so we've started to support that. And so we have this micro enterprise grant program, but as well as obviously ensuring that these folks are getting one-on-one TA. So that's been one of the ways in which we're working with our partners on the ground, from the Roxbury Innovation Lab to the Fairmont Innovation Lab, et cetera, because it's important that we are working with folks who are doing this job and supporting them, but as well as working with the actual small businesses themselves to get them exposed and connected to other resources.
And I want to jump in real quick, Madam President, if I may. Kai, I think it's super important that everybody who's listening to this understands that the need for PPP is not going to be a couple of months need. The demand is real. We are going to be wearing masks for a very long time. People need to stockpile masks, And so if you are able to get into the business where you are producing masks, or you can produce other personal protective equipment, this is the time to do it. And then Kai, I'd love for you to give me names of people who are doing it today. Because right now, the closest minority-owned business that we found doing masks is in New Jersey. And we're about to make a big order from them, which is all good.
Oh, we got to hear. Chief Barrows, I know folks who are doing it right here. So we're happy to connect you after the fact. I'm putting up my photo. Now that we're talking about protective wear on our face coverings, it can be a mask, it can be a scarf, it can be whatever. It is important, people. The governor's order went into effect yesterday. Make sure you cover up. This is my amazing team who deliver for District 7 every single day, who made this event possible, like in a week's time. So I want to give them a shout out now. And then I want to go right into Haris, and then I want to bring Kai into the mix. Back into the mix. Haris, jump in.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to piggyback off of what Kai was saying about the micro businesses. It's really important because these are more than a mom and pop. They're your neighbors, they're your best friends, they're people really trying to make it. So we want to support them as well. One of the things I do want to say is that we're working with TAC to try and figure out some areas that we can do some group activities in the square, along with Frugal Bookstore for the fall, late summer, early fall, should we be out of quarantine. And we are meeting bi-weekly, I think it is, Clarissa, to discuss those things and how to make them happen. So please look for that. It'll be an opportunity for vendors to be out there. The other
Sounds
thing we're
good.
gonna
So
do,
I just want to remind you guys on the follow-up, you have less time. So if you could wrap that up.
no problem.
Yeah.
The most important thing is that Roxbury Main Streets has been discussing rebranding of the square and using some of our funds to really market the square as a whole, to invest in information about individual businesses across the district. Because one of the complaints is that, hey, well, we haven't been there in 30 years. We have no idea who's there. So we want to help.
You know what? I really appreciate you saying that. Can I just say, because, you know, I think a lot of us are carrying around these negative connotations of what the square is. And I say a lot of us, okay? So let me be real clear. And I think, as I said in the beginning, it's important that we control our own narrative, and that we use an asset-based lens. And I know many of us talk about the square in a negative way. What I love about the square, I've always loved the square, number one. I grew up walking distance from the square. But and I don't know why we're calling it the square. When I grew up, we called it Down Dudley. You have to say the Down Dudley, because that's how it was. But anyway, we have more Black-owned businesses in Nubian Square than we've ever had, ever, period. Ever. And we need to make sure that they can thrive. I want to grab Kai, Malia, and Shagun in that order. Quick adding in, and then we're going to keep these questions moving.
We made an announcement yesterday that we are building an online platform for designers, for those who make PPE products, which would include masks, it would include soaps, it would include hand sanitizers, visors. We are also in contact with some of our vendors who want to not only be on this platform, but also donate products to the cause. And so we'll be in touch with that information by next week. And then the other thing is we've been on this journey, Haris, since Dudley, you know, in crisis in terms of rebranding. And so I'm not sure why we're not a part of the conversations in terms of like festivals and things like that. But, you know, we're here, and TAC is right upstairs and a partner with us. This is what we do. And we would want to ensure that it's an inclusive process when it comes down to the information that we hold from those meetings, which is being synthesized, and offering it to you and to TAC and whoever else, you know, is creating opportunities for the reopening, hopefully fall.
Yep. I think that's great, making those connections. Let's bring Malia in and Shagun. Malia?
So mine was around the masks. One of the things that we're thinking about, and I don't know if this is something that the city or Black Market or Main Streets or, you know, maybe some can help us think through, is this idea of how do we support small businesses in continuing to have PPP? I know for the bank, it's going to be a huge expense every day, people having PPP. And so what I was thinking about is, could we do sort of like a corporate thing, a corporate TOMS for masks, you know, for when a corporation buys 10,000 masks for their employees, like 5,000 masks get donated to small businesses. We tried to set something, I thought it was just too much logistics for us as a company, but it's something that I know our facilities manager would love to be a part of. So if there was a way to, you know, for us to continue to support PPE distribution, whether that's supporting the designers that work in Black Market to distribute, but some type of TOMS thing. The other piece that I just wanted to bring up quickly while time's up is businesses that were planning on opening. How can we help them?
Yep. Thank you for that. Let me say this, Shagun, I know we have you in the queue. It looks like Kai wants to do a direct response to that, so I'm gonna let her jump in. And I also I'm getting text messages of people who are ready to buy these masks from your vendors, Kai, already. So why don't you jump in with a quick 60 seconds to Malia, and then we're gonna let Shagun get in. You're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
I'm sorry, I thought I did. Very quickly, Malia, it's a methodical process because of the supply chain. It is not as easy as it looks because there are so many stops when it comes down to getting raw materials and goods and things of this. So we are trying our best to be, cautious and careful, and at the same time supportive. And then on the flip side, the mail service is slow as heck right now. So getting them out to people is also a problem to be solved. I'd love to, me and you, we've been trying to connect, and it's been so many different things, but this is something we can directly connect around, okay? Because the demand is there and the skills are there, and we're working with some of the fab labs in order to produce. So this is not just about the makers, this is also about pattern makers and folks that are providing some of the ancillary products that go along with this. Some of the distilleries that we have in our queue that are providing hand sanitizer, okay? And they've been given the green light to do that. So we'll talk offline, okay?
Sounds great. I'm gonna get Shagun in here. Shagun?
Well, all I'll say is that, Counselor, I really appreciate the fact that you brought us together, because it sounds like there's some alignment between some of the panelists here today. So all I'll say is this: Kai, you're also going to get a call from me, and maybe we'll just do a three-way chat. Because,
hey, there it is. I want in.
We'll just do a whole panel thing after this.
Because we've already been plotting. Some of us have already been plotting on the side about what the next steps are.
Right.
This is not one and done, and we can't keep having the same conversation.
Right.
Every conversation has to move us forward toward solutions and actions.
Absolutely,
ahead,
because this is actually a really important point. As we're thinking about reopening, a lot of our members, even at the beginning, before or when the governor announced the stay-at-home advisory, talked about access to PPE, because so much of it was being donated at the state level to get to our frontline workers, which was critically important. But a lot of our businesses that are considered essential have workers coming to work with no masks, no sanitizer, et cetera. And our communities are already being impacted, so we're increasing the ability for the virus to spread. So what I'll say is, the way we have been responding is exactly the same way that Kai just mentioned. We've developed an online platform statewide to get Black and brown businesses across the state on this platform, to create that marketplace, the e-commerce aspect of it, and then also address the delivery aspect. So I want to talk with Kai and Malia and you, Council President, and others who are interested in how we fine-tune both of these platforms to make sure our businesses are making money while also protecting our community.
Amen. And this is a perfect segue. We're talking now about reopening and what happens, whether it's May 18th or whenever, what the plan is for reopening. And this is really for the panel at large. It might be good maybe for city folks to jump in. But when businesses are allowed to reopen, those that have to stay closed, because obviously everyone's not going to open at the same time, again, what kind of support will be available? Maybe this is, we just have to keep advocating for more funds or for this window to open up again. But beyond the funds, I think it's also important to recognize that there need to be new ways of being, some new protocols for how we're going to interact with each other safely when brick and mortar businesses reopen. And so I wonder if any of the entrepreneurs on the call are thinking about that. And from the city's perspective, Chief Barrows, if you could offer what the city is doing in terms of offering guidelines to small business owners around how to safely reopen.
Sure, I'll jump in. I think it's really important, and the small businesses know this, right? Every small business, when you open, you will need to provide masks and protective equipment for your employees, right? Kai and Shagun and Malia have talked about there's going to be folks in the community that's going to supply. That would be a beautiful thing. If we can have suppliers from our community protect our employees, then we've got the right loop of economic development happening. And so as the city, I want to say we're willing to buy masks from people in the community to start this up, right? I'm going to put it out right here. We're willing to sort of do a startup. And in fact, I want to work with Malia, Kai, and Shagun and think about startup capital, right? Maybe there's a contract that starts it up. Maybe there's something else. But the notion that businesses need to understand now that if you're going to open up, you're going to have to open up and protect your employees and make sure that your customers walk into a safe place. Really important.
Thank you. One thing I want to put on the table, and then we're going to open this up. We've got some questions from people who submitted them through the Google Forms. We've got more questions coming in from online. I want to get to those questions. One thing that we did not talk about this evening that I think is key to the equitable recovery, particularly for Black and Brown folks who have been left out, is our cannabis industry in Boston. Many have raised concerns about what is happening in Nubian Square and the difficulty of getting a shop there because of different buffer zone issues. We do, so that folks know, this again is about economic justice, it's about racial justice, it's about taking something that was meant to harm Black folks, and that being the prohibition of cannabis and the war on drugs, and using it to rebuild. And so we have an opportunity, because it's $1 billion industry, to make sure, again, that we are putting at the front of the line those who have been harmed and left behind. And so I'd be interested, as we shift and I dig for these other questions, just some thoughts there. For folks who are watching or on this panel, I did file a hearing order so that we can review the implementation of the ordinance that we passed last fall. That was the game-changing, groundbreaking legislation last November. Since that time, the mayor created a board. He seeded the equity fund, which is great. And as we talk about phasing in, I think it's important to understand where this industry fits into all of that. And that's not necessarily for you to respond to now, Chief Barrows, or anyone here, but I wanted to put that out there because it's almost like an elephant sitting in the room if we don't address this key industry that's $1 billion industry that has been weaponized against Black people, that we need to take control over and build our own wealth in our communities. And there are lots of barriers that remain. So I just want to put that out there. I want to get some questions in from folks who have been submitting them. We have a question from Bridget Wallace, who says, who will lead the post-COVID-19 recovery plan for the Square to revive the businesses and allow for new opportunities to emerge? In many ways, this is the conversation we've been having. If people wanted to offer a quick 30-second, like 1, 2, 3 kind of plans of what your takeaways are, that might be helpful. And there are a couple of questions that are like that. But if anyone wants to jump in, I see Haris has a hand up. I'm going to call upon him. Haris?
I just want to say this. Roxbury Main Streets will definitely be a part of the lead in helping to recover. That's our job. That's our plan. Our board is very much supportive of all of the stakeholders in Roxbury. So we're going to work together to make sure that happens. I just want to make one note about the cannabis industry. Today, I was disheartened by the fact that the governor opened up the golf courses for people to use and not the cannabis industry. Here in Nubian Square, we do not have cannabis yet. There are some ancillaries around the way. It's not for Main Streets to decide, but it's important. There are health concerns with those who do not have access to cannabis, and there are economic issues as well. So I just want to say to everybody, it's about advocacy. One of the things that
is it about advocacy? Because that's not what I heard. When you told me the governor opened up golf courses, but keeps Pure Oasis closed in Grove Hall, I didn't hear that it was about advocacy. I heard something else, but that's another conversation.
It's another conversation.
That's another conversation of what that challenge is. Shagun, you jump in here, please.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Haris is saying. And I know that, as an organization, we sent a letter expressing our disappointment with the governor that he decided to close adult use cannabis shops a week after Pure Oasis opened.
Exactly.
And so that we already talked about inequities, and the governor and the legislature talk so much about how equity is a key stake in their campaign platforms. And yet when we have the opportunity to actually instill some equity in different industries, they so often drop the ball. I will say too, to the question that Bridget asked, I appreciate the fact that she's watching. There are a lot of efforts happening in the city. So Haris mentioned advocacy. I think of the Black Boston COVID-19 Coalition, where the Black Economic Justice Institute is leading that effort, and many stakeholders who may be watching here and who are leaders in our community, as well as the Black Boston Hospitality Coalition, which are a number of the restaurants that have banded together here in the city, particularly here in Roxbury, who are advocating for more resources and ways to make sure that they're reaching customers. So these efforts are happening. It's really up to us to make sure we're supporting them.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to jump into another question. This one is from Amanique, who wants to know, how are we supporting local restaurants that are closing, and what resources and safe spots are there for people experiencing homelessness?
Yeah, good.
Anyone can jump in. Show of blue hands, if you will, please, and I will call upon you. Yeah, Shagun, please jump in.
Well, I mean, I can defer to the chief to.
Oh, Chief, I'm sorry, Chief, were you looking for your blue hand?
I
You letting this millennial outdo you? Come on now.
Hey, I'm slow on the draw on this one, but I did want to jump in. Look, it's super important that we support our businesses right now, right? And so I want to say to the restaurants, the Black restaurants out there, we just supported a couple of different initiatives, really important. Commonwealth Kitchen just organized 20 minority-owned restaurants in Boston, many of them Black-owned, to provide food to people who need food right now. And so we just pumped in some money into that initiative. It's a really important initiative. We just did something similar to that with the NAACP. I'm not going to go steal announcements and make an announcement here. So we've got 3 different initiatives like that going on right now. And if you are a restaurant trying to provide food while people who need food, please contact the Office of Economic Development. You can do it through our smallbiz@boston.gov email. We'd love to plug you into one of these initiatives so you can provide food right now to people who need food.
Can I just make one additional comment? We've also, just so folks know, we've created a couple of tools that are really important for restaurants. We created a guidebook for takeout, how to become a restaurant who does takeout and delivery. We've also created 2 platforms for open businesses. So one is boston.gov/restaurant-support, which I'll put in the chat, but this is for any open restaurant to be listed on the city's website as a way of engaging additional customers. So you're basically telling people what your menu is, what your limited hours are, and then we did the exact same thing for open essential businesses. So please check those out, and I'll put the links in the chat.
Thank you. And to repeat the email address, it was smallbiz@boston.gov. I'm going to call upon Shagun. Do you still want to get in? And we'll follow you up with Malia.
No. The chief, Natalia, covered.
All right,
all
wonderful. We'll go to Malia and then Haris.
I wanted to mention that another group of businesses or industry that we're seeing is suffering, especially around eligibility for PPP. And, we would love to figure out how to continue to support the beauty shops and barber shops and beauty salons. A lot of them rent their chairs, so those aren't staffed, they're 1099. And
I'm going to ask you guys, when we're talking about Malia and all the panel, if we're talking about PPE, protective personal equipment, and we're talking about PPP with the Paycheck Protect, if we could just spell those out in case in the audio that are not coming across clear. What you meant was the Paycheck Protection Program, right?
Yes, the Paycheck Protection Program. And so I know that, especially in Nubian Square, but in Roxbury and in general, we have a lot of barbershops and beauty salons. And so, I think that's another, as we think about how do we support the recovery, there was some eligibility issues or even just access to that. So that's another business industry I would throw in.
Excellent. Haris.
We're talking about this recovery. First thing, I got a text from my mom saying we will make masks too. So Kai and John put us in there. But
I got the same text, brother. Your mother's all over.
All right, so we're on the same page. What I want to say is I'm concerned with those who don't speak English in this recovery, and them accessing this information that we're talking about right now, them having a voice, because I know that it's a need, it's a want, but we haven't yet figured out how to do it. So I want to propose this to this group. How do we, for Nubian Square, figure out how to include our Spanish speakers and those that are West African, our Haitian families, everything out there, our Cape Verdeans that speak Creole, you know, we really need to include all of that in this recovery.
I appreciate that. And I appreciate that you posed the question, how can we as a group in Nubian Square? Please also know that we as a group of counselors raise that issue in every hearing. How all of us can access this information has been raised in every single one of our interactions with city folks. We talk about it in the briefings with the mayor every morning. Very important, at the forefront of all of our minds.
And if I can say, Madam President, you know, we've probably got people out there. We're talking about paying people to do technical assistance. This is a different kind of technical assistance. So we've got organizers out there that if we can get some city funds, we can pay those local people to help us reach them, just like we do with the census.
Exactly. I'm going to go back to the questions. We have one here from David Price, who says, how can stakeholders and residents come out of the shutdown and together address the pre-existing challenges to creating more vitality in the square? That has been the topic for the since 5:30 that we've been having. So I will go on to the next one. Same thing on this next question. It's from Kaden Nurse. What are some simple ways that we can help support our local businesses during this time? Anyone want to offer a quick 30-second? If you've got a shameless plug on what your website is now that you've moved to online, this is your chance to get it out there. I see a hand from Kai Grant. Kai, you want to jump in?
Well, this was the question that you gave me.
Okay.
So I just I have a list of things that people can do, I think, that are really simple, with or without money. This is how folks out here can support small businesses. Community members can share pertinent information about funding opportunities with small businesses via social media or email. If funds are available, budget money to support a specific local restaurant or bar in your neighborhood. One of our customers is an expert graphic web designer, come to find out, and she offered services yesterday on our social media platform. So if you have a skill set and you have the time or the wherewithal to volunteer, do so with the business that you find in your local area. Organize a GoFundMe or a small campaign on social media, or provide money for one, like for Frugal Books. Leave a positive review on a business page. Those things are simple. If you haven't done that, do a Yelp. Leave a like and share business posts that resonate with you. And check first, obviously, for transparency to make sure these organizations are doing their due diligence in terms of equity. But there are certain organizations that have community funds that you can contribute to. And so those are some of the things that I came up with just before the call.
That's excellent. Thank you. Anyone want to chime in? Haris?
To piggyback, those are great things, and we'll support Black market and making sure that we get that word out there about those opportunities as well, of what they can do. One of the things I want to do a little bit more on a larger scale, Boston is the economic center for New England, not just Massachusetts. So there are a lot of businesses, corporations that have their people at home right now, but we'll be bringing them back. For restaurants, talk to your company about doing some catering, since we're not going to really be able to get together in restaurants in the beginning. There's a lot of catering out there and money that can be spent that way. Also, those that are on television or doing shows that need clothing. It's a way to really get out there, get a contract with some of those TV personalities to provide clothes for them. There's budgets out there to buy things. So if we think creatively, we can get a lot of stuff done.
Yep, I'd add one more thing. Folks who are relying on the Grubhub and the Uber Eats, support your local folks. Support your local folks. Malia, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, quickly. I think, we're talking about the recovery and we're talking about going back to a new normal.
No, we're not.
No, we're not. Okay, thank you. Because, we need to think differently, and how we're thinking locally, like that just needs to become how we're doing it. And like once you can get 500 people like back in Walmart, it doesn't mean that's what you start doing. So much about what we're talking about, there's a momentum behind it and da da da, but we didn't have much before COVID. And I think we really want to use this as a time to lean in and rebuild our structures. I think about New Africa and Alabama, just the models that we've had so that we can survive another COVID if it were to hit.
That's right. That's exactly right. Kai, please chime in.
Yes, there was a young woman who asked about homelessness and we didn't address it. I wanted to make sure that with the coalition or the platform that we're building, that's been a mention with one of the makers is her concern about making sure we can donate a certain X amount of, things to the homeless population. But I wanted to field it to Natalia or John to see what the city's doing on a larger scale. And we have such a huge population of folks that are couch surfing or basement living inside of Nubian Square. It's a huge, huge ordeal. So
you're absolutely right. And if anybody has anybody who they know is homeless and needs a place, please call 311. Part of the setup at the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center by the city, all those beds, a big part of that is for the homeless population. They're getting tested, they're getting services, they're getting food. So if you know of anyone who needs a place, and look, if you know of anybody who needs a place to quarantine, this is a problem. People have raised it. They've said it time and time again. You've been found that you have COVID, but you don't have a lot of space to get away because you might not have a lot of space in your home to do it. Give the city a call at 311. Talk about needing space to quarantine. Once again, Boston Hope, which is a setup at the BCEC in South Boston. We've got some beds there. We'd love to be able to help out.
Excellent. I'm going to come back to some of the questions here. I want to make sure that we can get through them and end at a decent time for folks. We have a question from Marissa Luce, who says, what is the plan to support businesses who are unable to access relief money? Do we know what businesses are in critical need? Nubian Square stakeholders establishing economic recovery networks consisting of businesses, community-based organizations, neighborhood associations, and community leadership to continue the conversation and coordinate services and develop a strategy for collective action, much of which we've been discussing now. Anyone want to offer a 30-second? I see Shagun's hand is up. Shagun, you want to jump in?
Sure, yes.
50 seconds, because you're a preacher's kid.
I'll only take 30 and I'll clear my throat for the other 30. So, in terms of providing economic support to businesses that are shut out of a lot of these relief programs, one of the other things that we're doing at BECMA is that we haven't announced it yet, so my director of strategic communications is going to probably kill me because I'm just announcing everything that we haven't announced publicly yet. But, we have started our own grant fund, and that effort was made possible by Berkshire Bank and the wonderful Malia Lazu, who's on the call right now, who helped to seed that fund. And I'll take my other 30 seconds to say that this, and I'm going to say this every time I'm on a call with Malia, and even if she's not on, that Malia is a perfect example of why representation matters and why we need not only our skin folk in places, but our kinfolk who are looking out and making sure that all of the folks in the community are benefiting from their service in whatever organization they're in. But so anyway, I say that to say that because of that investment from Berkshire Bank, we've been able to start our own grant fund, which we'll be announcing later on this month, to be able to help folks who are under $250,000 in revenue, who are in these critically hurt industries that Malia mentioned, barbershops, hair salons, folks in the restaurant industry, et cetera, because we know that we can't just rely on government support to help and grow our businesses. We also need to make sure that we're getting our own funds to support our businesses. So we've already raised a few $100,000. We want to get to a good place where we can help as many people as possible. We are a statewide organization, so we want to make sure that, yes, we're helping folks in Boston, but there are Black and brown businesses all across the state who need our help. But that's going to be a resource that's available.
I'm going to call on Natalia to jump in here on the city response. I think it's important that we're lifting up barbershops and hair salons. I'd be interested, and I've asked this question in a hearing, how many of our businesses make up that industry, because in my estimation, as I look at Nubian Square and its Grove Hall, a lot of our businesses tend to be those businesses. And so there is a disproportionate hit there because we're overly reliant on those businesses. The other issue is barbershops and hair salons provide a very important service to the Black community beyond grooming. Mm-hmm. This is a disruption to our social network that is crazy. This is where Black folks go to get information. This is how we connect around what schools we're sending our kids to, et cetera. And the disruption and the social fabric of that social network for us is huge. Same thing with churches. So we need to address that. I'm going to ask Natalia to get in this I'm going to give you 60 seconds. Haris, you're going to get 30 seconds, and then we're going to go on to the next question. Natalia?
Thank you. We don't have the number. I don't have the number in front of me, so I will find the number of how many barbershops, nail salons, beauty salons, etc., are in Boston and Roxbury, and in particular in our communities of color. But I did want to just touch on briefly, we've been using data from the very beginning of this pandemic to address the needs and understand the needs of our small business communities. And so from week one all the way till now, we've been putting out a survey each week to kind of test how the impacts have changed over time. So I do recommend, if everybody has a moment, please report to us how you are being impacted. This helps shape our advocacy. It helps shape how we are, programming what we're doing in response. And so I think part of that is we need to also have representative responses. And
how can people get that information to you? Can you share again?
Yes, absolutely. So the survey is on our response page on our boston.gov/small-business. We update it every time there's a new survey that goes out. We send it out via email. I will send it to all of you. I'll put it in the chat. I'll put it in the link on the Facebook Live, because it's really important that we capture the stories, both for qualitative but also quantitative analysis. And we are really learning from folks how they're needing support, what that support looks like, and how we should be responding. So I just wanted to do a quick plug for that.
Thank you so much. Haris.
I just wanted to thank Marissa for her question. She's one of our board members, and she's really out there in the field. One of the issues that we're dealing with that needs to be discussed is not just economic recovery, but health and wellness. We have citizens that are being pushed out of the South End and Mass Ave that are dealing with addiction recovery, as well as mental health. Is a big topic now that we've been quarantined, really not talking about it enough, and it's affecting our everyday people. So that's something that I want to make sure that we talk about. We're going to press on the city. That's my job. Keep up the pressure. John came out and talked about some things that the city is going to plan to do for our area. So we just want to make sure those continue to happen. But also, we got a volunteer from what we're talking about right now. Shout out to Hussein Ali, Salam Alaikum, and Ramadan Abar. He has said that he's willing to help with the Somali community and some of our other African communities that need help during recovery. So you can join us soon.
Excellent. I'm going to get back to some of these questions. There were a couple of questions that were similar, so we grouped them. They came from Sharon Hinton and Dr. Keith Motley. One was, how many businesses in Nubian Square are owned by Black people? And the other was, how do we restore Black business? I'm not sure that there's a clear answer. Looking to you, Chief Barrows. I think it would be helpful to kind of have this analysis of how many businesses are Black owned, how many are people of color owned, et cetera. How many are shut down, how many are reopened, how many are food, how many are not. Is that in the works? What is happening with that? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll work with Haris and is it Robert George, Haris? Is that your new executive director? We're really excited that you named him tonight Robert George, welcome on board. We're looking forward to working with you to provide this kind of analysis. How many Black-owned businesses, how many businesses of color, how many women-owned businesses, and then let's look at the flow of money, right? Let's do an analysis that allows us to understand who's doing business with whom and how we support that network to complete the kind of flow of dollars that we need to see in our community. I want to go back to this point that Haris just raised. We are seeing an increase in suicides. We're seeing an increase in domestic violence. We're seeing an increase in mental health calls, right? And so for all of us here, we've set up a line at the city that is a hotline, call 311 and they'll put you right through it. But the community network and supporting each other is super important here, right? Calling folks that you might think is in a little distress and helping out by maybe plugging them into a program or something. We're seeing a lot happening in our community. This is dire times. I lost my aunt, I lost a cousin, I just buried someone where you could not go to a funeral. People are having some hard times with this financially, personally. Let's make sure that we're doing all to help our folks out.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to take us back to the questions. If you could, before I do that, John, give us a sense of a timeline and when this assessment and working with the Main Streets and all of that. I also want to lift up that there have been community-driven surveys that have taken place over the years, and I want to be mindful as we do new surveys that we're building upon that work, because again, we don't want to have the same conversation. We want to build upon the work that we've been doing. So I would encourage that from your office as well, John, because I know you guys are doing surveys, and obviously you have to, you're looking for specific information, and that's fine. But I want to just remind us that there has been a lot of work that's happened in the past, and we need to build off of what is working and scrap what doesn't work. Back to the questions, there was something here from Lewis, not sure what the last name is, says, do all the wonderful arts and cultural entities like Roxbury Cultural District, Main Streets, Madison Park, TAC, have a mechanism to come together to have a cohesive cultural vision for the square? It sounds like some of that was discussed here, and it sounds like more connections are going to happen, bringing Black Market into the fold and all the work that they've been doing around festivals and really helping to be is it a tastemaker, Kai? What's a trendsetter? I don't know, whatever the term is.
Well, we place make. I mean, that's one of the things that we do.
That's the term.
We envision what we want to see for our community, and we allow for healing to come forth in art. So we had the opportunity last year, thanks to Department of Neighborhood Development and the Department of Economic Development, who said, hey, can you guys please? So we had the opportunity last year of thanks to creating a small festival. And so,
Hi, can you pause just a second?
Sure.
I think you may have another device on, and if that's the case, it's creating an echo. So you're not really able to kind of do the, multiple things here. So if you could maybe start again, wrap up. Yeah.
Sure. We partnered with over 12 organizations, including Main Streets and the Roxbury Cultural District, and ACE and a number of others, in order to reinvigorate an empty lot that has been blighted for over 50 years, the Blair lot, which is directly next to Black Market. And we were able to have 12 live artists come in, 25 vendors, yada, yada, yada. The point is this. We need to make sure that, and I'm on the board of the Roxbury Cultural District, so I'll take responsibility. I was hospitalized 90 days ago, and right before that, I think it was the same day of my hospitalization, we had our last board meeting. So what I want to do is push the board again to figure out what the plan of action is for 2020, because the community deserves that. And we need to ensure that we can create an opportunity for these artists to be able to have platforms, and making sure that they not just have a platform to do their art, but they're paid for it. And that is one of the biggest initiatives that Black Market was taking on this year.
Yep.
We were hosting sessions for Boston Foundation and doing, and on that pathway.
That was great. So I'm glad that's happening. I want to highlight something you said that I think is really important, that we all need to walk away from this conversation with, and not just the people in this Zoom discussion, but everyone watching. And that was, I'll take responsibility for that. That is literally what you just said. I'm on the board, I will take responsibility for that. And that's what we need to do. I want to call upon Haris, and then I want to make sure we're moving through some more of these community questions. Haris?
So it's important that we talk about the arts. I'm glad that question came up. And just want to put out there, it doesn't take an organization. We are so happy that we are a cultural district now, thanks to the work done in this community. But it's not just about the heart, but it's the soul of Roxbury here in Nubian Square, and that's our artists. And so you too, right now during quarantine, can support an artist. You can learn how to play an instrument right now, learn how to drum, you can learn how to paint by paying an artist to teach your child over Zoom, or teach yourself. You're bored, you have some money, don't just shop on Home Shopping Network, spend it in your community. So let's see if we can get the word out through the cultural district and link people up to artists that can really help them right now.
Great. This next question is from one of our sponsors, Angela, from the Boston Jobs Coalition, and it's really about workforce. To sum up, I'm going to just try to sum it up. It's pretty long here. She's asking about the Boston's labor workforce, ages 20 to 64 pre-COVID. What's the number of individuals in the labor force to date? If you could just speak to, and I'm going to direct this toward Chief Barrows, talking about how many people in Nubian Square potentially were laid off because of COVID, how many folks we can expect to return, and whether or not you have a sense of who might have been eligible for unemployment benefits. Specific to Nubian Square, I think there are a lot of good questions in her point that we may want to follow up some conversation around broadly the workforce in Boston. But for Nubian Square, if you could take that on.
Yeah, let me just say the industries that saw the highest amount of layoffs are in fact accommodations and food services. It's retail. It is personal care. So people talking about barbershops and salons and those. And if you take a look at Nubian Square, those are our businesses, right? Those are our businesses. So Nubian Square was hit hard. And we also know that given the history of recession, that Black folks are usually the slowest to get rehired, right? And Black businesses fail at a higher rate if the recession is too long. So we've got to make sure that we are paying attention to getting our businesses open in a way that's sustainable, because if the virus spreads again, we'd have to shut down the economy again. We can't do that. We've got to have the right protection, have the right gears, and have the right protocol. So look, I don't have the numbers in front of me, Madam President, but I will tell you with great certainty, given the industries that we've been following are the highest hit with the highest percentage of unemployment, I know for a fact that Nubian Square was hit hard.
Yep. And Natalia, I'm just going to move through. We've got 5 more questions. These have come from the Facebook. I want to make sure that we get to them. We are at 7:21. I want to make sure that we get to them. I want to offer you guys the opportunity to close with some clear, concrete next steps. So with that said, we will go to the first question, and it's from Ricardo Pierre Luis, and this is directed toward Chief Barrows. It says, I'm an NBE company here in Boston who was selected for small business relief, but I haven't received funding yet. How can I and other business owners check the status of payment? Great question.
Yeah, fabulous question. I'm going to give out Natalia's email right now. It's Natalia Urtubey. Natalia, if you can put it in the chat at boston.gov. Email her one time, she'll give you a response. Email her another time so you can get another response. We're going to continue to go through the checks, and we understand that this is urgent, right? And we're going to try to move to the city process as quickly as possible to try to get the checks out there. But please email her directly so you can get a direct response on your business.
Yep. I'm going to ask my staff on the call to take the information from the chat. So a number of email addresses, websites, whatever's been links, whatever's been shared in the chat, and please put it out on the Facebook Live. Please also let folks know questions are now closed. We have the final 4 that we're going through, and I hope folks have found this informative and helpful. The next question is from Cheryl Strotter, and it's directed toward Malia Lazu. What is the credit score needed for a Berkshire Bank loan? I love how simple these questions are. Malia, can you?
So that really depends. And right now, it's a time to get a loan. Right now, you're about at the lowest rates as you can get, and the Fed is, I think, what are they, a little above 0 now? So, you know, most loans are going to be competitive. It depends what you want. We do have a specific loan for minority startup businesses, and a specific pipeline for debt for businesses, and those rates are between 0 and 2%.
Yep, and if you're not a startup, if you're an existing business that may be looking for some sort of relief because—
So you'd probably be at the higher end of around 2%. If you do want to get a regular loan, and I think, we need to talk about, right, again, like what do we think we have access to and what should we have access to? Again, those rates are going to vary. They also vary on the considerations that we take into the loan. So credit score, collateral, all things like that can help.
Thank you. This next question is from Bernadine DeSanges, and I pray to God I pronounced your name correctly. I apologize if I did not. And it says, what can small businesses do to be considered for contracts? And how can we as small businesses hold the city of Boston accountable to receiving those contracts? I love that question, Bernadine. Yeah, I'm going to start with you, Chief Barrows.
Yes.
And I know we talked a little bit about this during the call, so if you could just keep your response brief, and then I'm going to let Shagun get in for a response. Go ahead, Chief Barrows.
Yes, absolutely, Madam President. This is Madam President's favorite question every time she gets me on the in the chambers and now online. It's an important question. Let me just say first and foremost, you do not need to be a certified MBE, but I'm going to ask you to start by being a certified MBE. Please contact the Office of Economic Development. Send me an email at john.barrows@boston.gov. Let me put you in touch with Stacy Williams in our office, and let us make sure that you're a certified MBE, just so we can be talking to you, sending you out the bids, letting you know what's available, try to connect with you on something that might make sense for your business. We just want to build a relationship with you so we can try to get you some kind of a contract. Allow us to do that. That's the first step. I'm asking everybody on the line with us here who wants to do business with the city, try to certify with us as an MBE or a WBE, women-owned businesses as well.
Thank you for that. And Bernadine, in case you did not know, in 2018, the city of Boston spent $664 million on goods and services, and less than, what's the figure? Less than 1% went to Black people, less than 1% went to businesses owned by women or locally owned businesses. Shagun, you want to jump in on that one?
Oh, sure. No, I'll just say, I'll echo what the chief said, that, we also encourage our business members to become certified either at the city or the state level. One of the things that we appreciate is that there's now a partnership between the city and the state, that wherever you're certified, it will be recognized here in the city or on the state level. What I will say, to Bernadine, who I love very much, is that, in terms of the follow-up, that's why BECMA exists as a chamber of commerce for Black businesses across the state, to ensure that we are advocating on your behalf, that even, though you are reaching out to the city, we want to make sure that we're standing right there with you, following up and making sure that you're being connected to resources that are going to prepare you for contract opportunities at all levels, not just the city level, not just the state level, but also the federal level, working with the SBA, as well as for those in the private sector.
Thank you. I have a question here from Patricia Belfield, who says the city has conducted 3 to 4 surveys of businesses. How can the public get copies of completed surveys?
Great question. So we have actually posted survey results on our website, and the link is in the chat.
Wonderful. I'm going to remind my staff to take the information from the chat here in the Zoom and put it in the Facebook Live for those who may be watching and participating that way. We have a question here from Stephanie Shannon, who says, for youth who won't get a job this summer, how can they be included in mask making and other reopening ventures? Great question.
Yeah, fabulous question. I just want to say that we're working very hard to make sure that we have the same level of youth jobs as we did last year. We don't want to miss out on any of those jobs. You're going to hear a lot about online jobs. You're going to hear a lot about creative jobs. I'll give you a hint. We are working with some of the Mayor's Youth Council and BSAC from the school department to create youth-based jobs online. So you will hear more from us on that. The mayor is committed to making sure that every job that we have last year, we will have again this year. So youth will get jobs this summer.
Yep. There was a question from Cheryl Spence directed toward Haris around just access to main streets and how to connect and engage there. And perhaps if you could make clear to folks how they can participate, Haris, and what the process is, that would be helpful.
So right now,
I'm going to call on Kai to jump in for follow-up.
So I want to have a follow-up to that question about the youth, and then I'll answer.
30 seconds on that one, and then go on for the next one for
Absolutely.
60 seconds.
So one of the things I want us to encourage our young people to do is to be entrepreneurs themselves. There are a lot of young people out there that have ideas, they're artists, or they're ready to start businesses. It doesn't matter if you're 16, it doesn't matter if you're 15, you can do it as well. So let's support our youth in getting the help that they need. For Main Streets, what we're doing is we're gonna get this out to the community. We're getting ready to do a press release for our new, for our name and our new ED. We're gonna include revamping our website and creating better access. If you can visit us on Facebook for right now, and we're gonna change it tonight. Everything's happening right now. But you can still find us as Dudley Square Main Streets on Facebook. And if you wanna reach me, it's harishhardaway@yahoo.com. And we can go from there. There's gonna be a lot of information coming fast and coming right at you. So if you wanna volunteer, or you wanna support by donating money so that we can help the businesses in Nubian Square, just get in touch with us.
Thank you for that. Kai.
So there's an organization called Transformative Cultural Project, which is led by Aziza Robinson Goodnight. And we had a conversation this afternoon, and we're forming a partnership to ensure that we can have some of, she's doing something around workforce development, and she's waiting on some funding for that. The city approached her with that. And so that has to do with youth entrepreneurship. We're also, there's a couple of other organizations that we were reaching out to prior to my hospital stay, with Natalia over at Possible Project, and also the Roxbury Boys and Girls Club, which we are always in partnership with. So to Haris's point, we are really underscoring and pushing for financial literacy and entrepreneurial literacy within the youth demographic.
Excellent.
And making masks specifically.
Exactly. Malia, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in and say whatever configurations, whether it's with the jobs, Kai with you, we would be more than happy to do a financial donation so that youth can get paid to make masks for people.
Amen.
And so I'm going to second that. The city then will back up. We will make sure, Kai, that the young people that you're working with have the funds to get paid to do that work with you. So we're gonna back that up right now.
Excellent. So I do have team members also that are trying to take some notes. There are a lot of good chunks here in terms of commitments that are being made and follow up in terms of next steps. And I want to make sure that that happens. So again, the team members who are taking notes, and we're going to review this tape, it's important because we want to make sure that this is not happening in vain, that we are moving forward and moving the work forward. We have a question here from Bing. And Bing says, Dudley Main Streets was without an executive director from November until now. It's great that we have a new director, but we are still playing catch up due to the time that was missed. Are there specific resources or additional staffing available to accelerate the process of catching up and elevate the Dudley Retail District in a coordinated way?
So I think
And I'm going to start with you, Haris, and then everyone can chime in because it does speak to the coordination piece. Haris, why don't you jump in as the director, as the president, excuse me, of Roxbury Main Streets?
So thank you, Bing. Bing always keeps us on our toes here in Nubian Square, and he's one of the foremost stakeholders here. So honestly, right now, what we're dealing with is the funding for one executive director, which is our base funding that comes from the Boston Main Streets. What we do need are volunteers, and we also need funding to support additional staff. So if you know anyone that's willing to volunteer and help us work on a committee or start one or has an idea, we can partner with any corporation or any nonprofit to get the job done. It's really about collaborating and finding resources. It's not always about the money, but most of the time it's what makes the world go round. So we are actively seeking donations from some of the businesses who've already committed. But you know, this was COVID. Now we have to figure out, can they still make those commitments? But accelerating comes from partnerships. So Bing, let us know what we can do.
Let me chime in really quickly. So as the city of Boston funds all of the Main Street districts, I think one of the great opportunities that you have, Haris, and we've worked with you and we'll work with Robert as soon as he gets started, is that funding that you get is administrative to a certain degree. And so hopefully there's a little bit of wiggle room with some of those funds, and we can work with you on that to potentially get some, like a part-time support person for those 6 months that were not funded or before there was a director, and let's work on that, because I think it makes sense if there's some strategic ways in which you guys can bring in some more support for Robert up front. I think we should definitely do that.
Thank you. So we'll definitely be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on. There's the last question here, and then I want to give you guys the opportunity to offer some closings and final thoughts. This question is from Joe Feaster Jr. Is there any discussion on the state level and or city of Boston level about setting aside funds for Nubian Square as a significantly distressed area due to the pandemic? So if I understand the question, a special set aside fund for Nubian Square. It may not be dedicated to a specific race if that's the challenge, but could we dedicate it to a specific geographic area? Chief Barrows, let's start with you.
Yeah, Madam President, thank you. Thank you, Joe, for the question. There is clear commitment to Nubian Square, whether it's working with Kai so that we can make sure we're supporting down Dudley. And Kai, I want to thank you for your leadership in placemaking, your leadership in helping the artists in our neighborhood. We look forward to continuing to do that work with you, even in the virtual space, right? Or whether it's working with Haris and making sure that, now Roxbury Main Street is doing well and is strong. The city continues to be committed to Nubian Square. We're excited to get out there in one of these days and do a ceremony, right, for the renaming of the square. So the commitment is there. We'd love to continue to work with you, Madam President, on different initiatives that make sure that's targeted right to the square.
Excellent. Anyone else want to chime in? Because it sounds to me that might be, if we did a targeted geographic area versus a specific group of people, that might be a way around that. And clearly, this square has had its stops and starts. Malia.
Yeah, I think that's something else that, this group, and I know we would definitely be interested in funding. And my question also, because we work throughout the state, and gateway cities are a place that we're really trying to play as well. And could this be a model, that could help Worcester and some of the, that could be a model for the city of Worcester or some other cities throughout the state that we have. So I love the idea. I think that there's some neighborhoods that are just critical for culture. They're critical for economic development, and Nubian is definitely one of those spots.
Thank you. That was the last question. As we wrap up, I'm going to just ask that we all frame our final comments with "I'll take responsibility for." Okay? So as we wrap up, if you could say, "I will take responsibility for," that's point number one. And then the second point would be to kind of put out, you know, what your individual need is. Because again, I've got team members on the call. We want to make sure that we've got clear notes that we can follow up, particularly on the areas that we can, the areas that are actionable. Okay? So I'm going to call upon our wonderful folks over at Frugal Bookstore. If you want to kind of chime in, and if you want, if you could each go. I know you guys have been sharing the mic, but I'll take maybe one of you will say, "I'll take responsibility for," the other one can kind of put out what the needs are in terms of community and city government that are still on the table. You guys go ahead.
Thank you. So I'll take responsibility for, or we take responsibility for providing families that are in need. You know, we have been fortunate to have gotten some great donations with the GoFundMe. So what we want to do and what we want to take responsibility for is providing families who are looking for books, like physical books for their children. And we will donate those books to those families that, you know, we love ebooks, we love audiobooks, but it's nothing, you know, close to having a physical book in their hands. So we are taking responsibility for donating books to families who are in need and who are looking for physical books.
And Leonard, as you chime in, what you need from the community and what you need from city government.
We just need the community to just keep supporting us. Just, you know, like we say, just buy Black. You know, don't go to Amazon, come to Frugal Bookstore. And from the city, just keep sending those announcements that when there's resources and stuff available for us to apply for. That's what we need from the city.
Wonderful. Maurice, would you like to go next?
Well, one thing I want to say is I take responsibility for ensuring that the businesses in Dudley Square, with the help of our new executive director and our amazing board, that we work to connect every single business, whether you're brick and mortar or you are an entrepreneur or you're a micro business somewhere, to assist you reaching the resources that you need to survive. Because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about survival. And so what I want to challenge the city and our community is not to just be the message, but to be the example. So we need the commitment from the city that we spoke about and plan together that it happens for the community, for those dealing with recovery in this area. Also, we need people to spend their dollars. The stimulus check is to help you. And if you're getting some type of funding or resources that you can share with this community, every $25, every beef patty you buy around here, any clothes that you can buy through an online store, please do that because it keeps the lights on in Dudley Square.
Thank you so much. I'm going to go to Natalia next. Natalia.
Thank you so much. So I just want to say that every business out there has, you know, both the responsibility to advocate for themselves, but be incredibly connected with all of these amazing leaders that are in your community.
Natalia, I'm going to ask you to start by saying, I will
take responsibility for. Yes, ma'am. I was just saying my little closing before.
All right.
No, I take responsibility for continuing to execute and represent the small businesses in the city of Boston. I mean, I think it is really important that we are accessible directly to the businesses, but also to the leaders that are in our community. I do want to say I have not been invited to many other districts' conversations about, the post-COVID life. And I really commend Roxbury for, and everybody on this call for your leadership. I think it's really important that we continue to be available and support and connect with small businesses. And we are working real hard to get all of those checks out as quickly as possible.
Excellent. Can
I
we
just
now?
wanted to say, piggyback, Natalia, you guys are doing that. So shout out and thank you.
Thank you. And
Thanks,
Chief
Grace.
Barrows, why don't you go next?
Thank you, Madam President. I know I'm supposed to start what I take responsibility for, but I just want to thank you for bringing us together tonight. I take responsibility for a couple of different things. I want to get them up here. First is we will launch a new TA program that will include TA providers of color to provide technical assistance for businesses to get online, and we will target Nubian Square businesses. It will not be exclusively, but we will target Nubian Square businesses. Second, I want to say I believe I'm working with Malia and Kai to make sure that youth have jobs in the entrepreneurial space. Haris, I'm looking at you. We didn't offer, but I'd love to work with you on the same thing. We need to make sure that youth jobs include this summer entrepreneurship, and I need you guys to set that up so that we can help fund it. And then we will also take responsibility for making sure, Leonard, I heard you loud and clear, that we continue to get the information out to the community on what they can apply for. And so we're going to email to you tonight a reference handbook on the financial assistance that's out there, city and beyond that, so that make sure that you have that available.
Thank you. Kai.
So I take responsibility for reigniting the creative economy in Roxbury by partnering with Berkshire Bank, partnering with Roxbury Main Streets, partnering with BECMA, the City of Boston Economic Development team, obviously Councilor Janey's office, and a host of different vendors and community members and artisans that have come through and kind of partnered with us in the past. One of the things that I'm excited about is we are fortunate to have the second iteration of Robert Gibbs' work inside of Black Market. The first iteration of Breathe Life is a trumpet being blown by a little boy on blue.
For folks.
And yeah, it's a mural. And the second one is at Black Market. And the third one is in the South End. He is partnering with us to do a mask series, a Breathe Life mask series. And there are several other artists that are partnering as well. But we found that it's a way to really be meaningful around breathing and understanding the importance of breathing life during COVID-19. So that's where we're really psyched about that. And so if you want to help out with that, just stay in tune with the partnerships and become, connected as we send out more information. And I'm looking forward, you guys, to really, really connecting Haris and Shagun and Malia and John. So.
Thank you, Kai. And that's so dope. I'm so excited to hear about that project with Pro Black. My screen's freezing up, being crazy, yes. Let me call upon before I call upon the next speaker, can you hear me? So we got to wrap up, people. Before I call upon the next speaker, I want the folks at Frugal Bookstore to know that on the Facebook Live, your landlord, David Price, says you guys should talk to him about the rent. And I'm there to support you if you need a support letter. Negotiate your rent.
All the
Just
time.
know that. We're gonna wrap up because we've got 10 minutes. I want to quickly hear from Malia, then we'll go to Shagun, and then I will close. Malia?
Thank you, Madam President. Quickly, so yes, we will take responsibility to continue to work with Kai and John around the masks. We will also follow up with you to continue thinking about listening and how financial institutions can continue to support small businesses. And we will also take responsibility for pushing vendors where possible. I think that was a takeaway. And the takeaway that I heard actually in the Frugal bookstore, if there is a youth group that needs some books, give me a call, because that's something else that we would be more than happy is to sponsor a box of books for young people. So as we continue to listen on how we can play roles, I will also take responsibility to shop at Final Touch again and again, so I can get my
Amen.
and I will take to continue to shop in Dudley. And then the final thing, which is a shameless plug, but I haven't run out of time yet, I will take responsibility to share a national discussion that we're having on June 4th with Derek Johnson and a few other folks. It's on the future of the Black economy. And so I will take responsibility to share that with all of you.
This is so amazing. I just have to say that this panel is so dope. You pretty much just ran through a list of all the things that you will take responsibility for. And the instructions were to start with that one thing that you'll take responsibility for, something the community needs to do, something the city needs to do. And all of your stuff was focused on what you're gonna do. So that's just how amazing this panel is. I'm gonna close out with Shagun before I go and remind you, you have the opportunity to have those 3 buckets. I will take responsibility, what the community should do to support, what city government needs to do. Floor is yours.
Well, I will echo the sentiments of the entire panel, and thank you, Council President Janey, for convening this discussion, and to all of the residents of Roxbury who tuned in. Because I'm the grandson of a preacher, I do believe in speaking in 3 points, and so I will stick with the script that you've laid out. So I take responsibility on behalf of BECMA for collaborating with some of our panelists, Kai and Malia and the City of Boston, on this effort to not only provide personal protective equipment to essential workers and to our communities, but also to make sure that it is Black and Latinx-owned folks who are businesses that are profiting off of this, take responsibility for this new fund that BECMA is generating to provide some extra capital and emergency relief to our businesses who are not receiving this relief. And of course, commit to or take responsibility for continuing to advocate on behalf of the 14,000 Black-owned businesses here in the state of Massachusetts. In terms of needs, of course, we'll need the city and the state to support these initiatives, as well as everyone on this panel, and also need the city and the state to remember always that there are 1,200 Black-owned firms that employ 14,000 people and contribute billions to the state economy. And so when I think of what we can do, I often think of a proverb about community, which is the fact that if you want 1 year of prosperity, you grow grain. If you want 10 years of prosperity, you grow trees. But if you want 100 years of prosperity, you grow people. And so it's going to be incumbent upon all of us here to invest in our businesses, to ensure that we're continuing to grow people in our communities, and thus ensure the prosperity of our Commonwealth for many, many generations to come.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was such a wonderful note to end on. I want to say, I too am the granddaughter of a Baptist preacher, and full disclosure, my grandfather and Shagun's grandfather were best friends. We just discovered that in 2018. We did not know that. We had been working together, we had been friends, and we found out in 2018 that his grandfather and my grandfather were best friends. They were in each other's weddings, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, I will take responsibility as the president of the Boston City Council and as the District 7 City Councilor to continue my strong advocacy around this space. Nubian Square is close, near, and dear to my heart. As I said at the beginning, I will continue my advocacy around the city's spend and holding the city accountable for spending its dollars, its millions and millions of dollars with Black-owned businesses. I am unapologetic in my fight for Black-owned businesses. And for Roxbury and for Nubian Square, I will continue with that. I will take responsibility or my staff will take responsibility for trying to gather all the notes from this important conversation to make sure that we're going through it carefully in case there are some action items or solutions that haven't already been highlighted in this closing that we need to lift up. And I will take responsibility for continuing to convene spaces like this where we can bring thought leaders together, we can bring stakeholders together, where we can create opportunities for solution-driven conversations that move the work forward, where community folks are driving it. Okay, so that's what's important. We started off this conversation understanding there's no one coming in to save us. You know I'm a beautiful Black woman with Black girl magic, and I have my cape and my crown. And all of you do as well. And we're going to get this done together. And that's my commitment to you as a District 7 counselor and as the president, that we have to continue to fight for those who have been left out of the economic prosperity in Boston. We have to continue to lift up those who have been left behind and approach this work with an equity lens and an asset-based lens. And we are the ones we're waiting for. We're the ones that control our narrative. We're the ones who are going to get this work done together. I am deeply grateful for the partnership of the sponsors, and I just want to shout them out again: BECMA, Ujima, ACE, Reclaim, and the Boston Jobs Coalition. I want to thank these amazing panelists. Again, Chief Barrows, Natalia from the City of Boston. I want to say thank you to Haris, Kai Grant, Malia, my team, Shagun on here. I also, the Frugal Bookstore folks, Clarissa and Leonard, my team, they've been so amazing. We pulled this off just a week's notice. So want to shout them out. Specifically, I want to shout out Brandon. He's been in touch with many of you, taking the lead from my office to get this work done. I'm anxious to follow this up. Looking forward to continuing to build and partner with all of you and rolling up my sleeves, not just the folks in the Zoom on this panel, but everyone watching together. We work best when we work together, and that's how we're going to get this work done. So thank you all for tuning in. We finished early, 6 minutes to spare, 6 minutes, Dougie Fresher on. Thank you guys. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
We are now ending. Thank you, Wakanda. Yes, no more handshake.
Thank you.
Wakanda. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it. Really grateful. Thank you.
Hallelujah.